With Master Duel taking off in the last couple of years or so, I figured what better time to talk about a completely different Yu-Gi-Oh game that came out quite a long time ago. Yu-Gi-Oh! Legacy of the Duelist sees you play out iconic duels from the first 5 Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. All 5 of these campaigns are available from the very start of playing the game, and this leads us quite nicely to the main part of this challenge. Achievements are classified as rare if less than 10% of players have it. Each campaign has an associated achievement for completing them, but only the Zexal campaign is a rare achievement. Now, even though the campaign gives a rare achievement, we still are restricted in the way we can play it. Our main issue is how restricted we are when it comes to summoning. There's 5 different achievements for using different summoning mechanics. Ultimate Form is for XZ summoning, Sacrifice for Tribute summoning, Coalesce is for Fusion summoning, Tuned In is for Synchro summoning, and finally Chronomancer is for using a Pendulum summon. Not only are we restricted in summoning, but simply dealing damage is something we are also limited in terms of options for. The Damage Dealer achievement is awarded for dealing 200,000 in direct damage, and Effect Elitist is for dealing 100,000 in effect damage. Now bear in mind, this doesn't mean we can't deal damage in those ways, we just need to be aware of the running total. My initial instinct for doing this challenge was to just play for a bit and build up a catalogue of cards. That way I could create a deck that fit more within the parameters of the challenge. Unfortunately, there is another achievement for creating decks for the first time. This means that we're limited to using the default and story decks that the game provides for us. There are 2 things that we can do as much as we want and actually will help progress towards 2 other achievements that are rare. Firstly, there's Reflect Rager, where we need to accumulate 50,000 points of reflective damage, and secondly we have Chain Champion, where we need to chain 100 times. As for the remaining rare achievements we haven't looked at so far, there's Master Collector and Master Duelist. These are for unlocking all avatars and winning all duelist challenges respectively. This would require me to complete every campaign, so that's impossible. There's also For Real, which is for winning a ranked multiplayer online match. Now there's no reason in theory why I can't get this achievement, but if you want to try and win an online match under the restrictions already mentioned, you're a better duelist than me. Now with all these details in mind, let's jump into the challenge. So my first duel, my main goal was to just figure out what I've gotten myself into. I'm not exactly worried about winning first try, so there's no reason for me to do anything stupid. I immediately ruined this challenge. I assumed there'd be a lot of trial and error involved in this challenge, so I was kind of in autopilot while I watched something else, which meant I forgot my extra deck was completely off limits. So I guess to answer the question, can you get only rare achievements in Legacy of the Duelist, the answer is no, if you're an idiot like this guy. But assuming you aren't so stupid, let's continue on and see if it's possible. Annoyingly I can't undo this achievement, but I'll restart the duel and continue on as if nothing ever happened. Now, eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed there when I went to load the duel again that I actually had the next player unlocked. That's because of my actual successful attempt, my recording crashed. So I guess it's 3rd time's the charm? Thankfully I'm pleased to say I've gotten both my stupidity and technical issues out of the way early, so there shouldn't be any big issues from here, aside from the challenge itself. In this next attempt the game starts slow, but this is actually favourable for me. Due to the slow nature of the flip effect strategy Flip Turner uses, my plan for this opponent is to just let them deck themselves out, getting rid of any annoying cards when needed. In particular, Stealth Bird will burn my life points. Although it hasn't got huge stats, Messenger of Peace means I can't just attack over it. There is hope though. Deslakura will be flipped religiously, so this will cause my opponent to deck out much faster than me. Before the burn damage adds up too much though, I attack with a 1400 attack card to flip Stealth Bird. Now the opponent either can't use their flip effect next turn, or they'll have to leave it in attack position for me to take care of. Oh wait, never mind, Des Koala just wiped me out. Unfortunately, that Stealth Bird Des Koala duo proves to be quite effective as I lose a few more times to them. The next duel appears to be more of the same as I try to stall and Stealth Bird shows up. After dealing with 2 of them though, I feel pretty confident my opponent's main win condition has been dealt with. That said, I quickly realised that I need to deal with the fact that I could easily lose this match from normal attacks. Not long after that though, my opponent plays both Messenger of Peace and Gravity Bind. With the board full, all it's left for them to do is begin shedding their own deck with Deslakoda, so I just sit back and wait. Although I ended up winning this time, I realised that I should be careful when using cards like the Evil Thorn. I can't afford to do much effect damage since I may need that to win in the future. In the duel with Nelson, I begin with an initial plan to go for an aggressive early win after stopping their initial attack. I think about attacking but hesitate since one of the achievements means I should be trying to avoid direct damage. I can deal some damage as long as over the course of the challenge it doesn't exceed 200,000, but I don't want to waste some of that allowance so early on when I could easily lose this match. I see a glimmer of hope in Fiend Sanctuary. The token it summons deals damage to my opponent every turn I leave it on the field, but not soon as it's summoned is it tributed off. Shortly after this, it looks like I'm about to be defeated in the next few turns, as my opponent is now able to deal 3000 points of direct damage, but a lucky draw of a second Blustering Wind allows me to take care of both attacking monsters. A second lucky draw also provides me with the perfect card to counter my opponent's Phoenix Beast Garuda and deal some non-direct battle damage. My next turn, however, I make a mistake, thinking I have enough monsters to attack for game, but come up short, forgetting one of my monsters is still in defense mode. I try attacking again next turn for game, but my opponent is able to set up another large wall that I wasn't sure how I'd get past. But before I can even think of a plan, my opponent decides to deal 2000 points of damage to themselves, costing them the game. The next duel goes surprisingly well. After a little back and forth, I'm able to get a copycat card on the field with a decently high attack. Thanks to that and a handful of stat increasing cards, the copycat is able to, almost single-handedly, wear my opponent down with powerful attacks. Even more so, I was able to do all of this without dealing any actual direct damage, giving me some flexibility for later on duels. Much like the previous duel with copycat, the duel with this opponent essentially came down to making the most of their monster's high attack points by copying them and following up by dealing massive damage. I do take a little bit of a risk in the final turn by attacking the game with no clue what my opponent's back row card was, but it seemed too good of an opportunity to pass up. The next duel begins and I notice air traffic control in my opening hand. I spend time during the early phase of the duel trying to lure my opponent into playing 3 monsters in the hopes I may be able to just stall them out after that. For a while they continue to wear me down with just 2 monsters, and just as I think this attempt is dead, I draw Rye Rider, which after being attacked slows my opponent down significantly. With only 1 monster left to attack, I guess Dexter decides to add more monsters to their side of the field and can therefore no longer attack at all. After a few turns of nothing, the opponent's side of the field is completely full, and with seemingly no means to destroy my spell, all that's left to do is sit there and keep ending my turn until I win by deck out. My first few attempts at this duel, I panic a little when I see a bunch of high level monsters knowing I'm unable to tribute summon in this challenge. I should make it clear at this point that I stopped playing Yu-Gi-Oh! In the GX era, and only really got back into the last few years, so I have no idea what a lot of my own cards do here. After a few attempts though, I realise that the cards I have at my disposal at this time are all high attack monsters that can be special summoned without much difficulty. This makes it quite easy to deal the majority of the damage I need to by attacking over my opponent's monsters, but I take a final opportunity to attack directly for game. Now this duel goes about as well as I could ever hope. I'm not really sure what the long term plan was of Quint in this game, but they continue to use UFO Turtle's effect, giving me easy targets to attack over and deal battle damage. Even as I go for game, they decide to use Call of the Hornet for some reason to bring back UFO Turtle, once again saving me needing to inflict any direct damage to my opponent to win. Okay, looks like the training wheels are coming off here. No more naturally high attack cards to spam. I assume the idea of this deck is to focus on bringing out the useful XYZ monsters, but sadly that option isn't available to me here. I spend my first few attempts getting slaughtered by number 40 Gimmick Puppet of Strings, and no card in my deck has an original attack higher than it. Then we get to this game where my opening hand contains multiple options to deal with the Gimmick Puppet. After knocking it back a few times, I then get held up by a combination of Swords of Revealing Light and a high defense monster, so I set a weak card baiting the AI to switch to attack position, meaning I can then take it out, and then another one takes its place. Another Gimmick Puppet taken care of later, and it's becoming quite clear that Quattro is running low on resources. I take my time to build up my side of the field while making sure no troublesome monsters are summoned to the other side of the field, until I get extremely fortunate and end up with the exact right amount of damage I need to end the game. In the next duel I have quite a stally match, but I have less cards in my deck, so I know I can't simply win just by waiting for my opponent to deck out. Although I end up failing this time, it makes me think the way to win this duel could be similar to the first duel, where dealing damage through attacking may not be the only way forward. I actually start my second attempt off with Canyon and a high defense rock type monster, so maybe I can just work on chipping away at my opponent with reflected damage. This works a couple times, and while I had Canyon damage in my mind when I said reflective damage, Nitwit Outwit causing another attack to backfire gives me a great opening to set up for another win, dealing exactly the amount of damage I need. Going up against the fish deck this time, I get to see what the deck can really do with access to the extra deck. After being taken out with ease a few times, I begin the duel with Go 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 Golem, Golden Form, with some good targets to give it a large attack. With a good target in mind for my endgame, the first thing I need to do is take care of the Shocktopus. After doing that with my Go 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 Giant, and my opponent draining a significant portion of their life points with Soul Charge, there isn't much left for them to stop me whittling away the remaining life points thanks to Golden Form destroying anything they use for defense. This duel is where I really begin to struggle. I lose a lot here. The frequency at which my opponent's deck can get other XYZ cards just seems like it's too much for this deck, given its restrictions. As the losses start to rack up, I remember an option that is available to me at the very start of the game, When playing the campaign, I have the option to use the story deck, like I've been doing so far, or a user deck. Normally a user deck would be a lot more powerful than a story deck, since I'd in theory have access to all the cards in my collection. Unfortunately, the achievement The Duelist Begins is awarded for creating your first deck, and it's far from a rare achievement. This means I'm stuck with a few default options the game gives you from the start. I figure the original basic deck makes the most sense to use since it isn't built around the idea of using the extra deck. The issue remains, however, a few decent vanilla beatsticks is just not enough consistency to take down multiple XYZ monsters. After more failed attempts, I decided to try the synchro deck just to mix things up a bit. This turned out to be the right choice. My opening hand looks promising, Magic Cylinder gives me the chance to deal a nice chunk of damage, and cloning can at least give me something to crash into my opponent's monsters. I spent the first few turns building up a fairly strong board with quite a few useful back row cards, while it appears my opponent doesn't seem to have drawn too many powerful monsters. This is made apparent as they spend multiple turns just reviving Heraldic Beast Unicorn, which I'm able to attack over multiple times for a decent amount of chip damage. Unfortunately, cloning turns out to be not very useful, as it's immediately followed up by a Torrential Tribute, but I'm able to prevent a counter attack by bringing back Mechanical Chaser. Things really begin to improve from this point though, as Mechanical Chaser is able to make the full use of Rush Recklessly and Battle Tune to repel even more attacks. I'm able to revive another monster with a reasonably high attack, and with that I prepare to end the duel. My first try is annoyingly stopped by a Heraldry change, but they foolishly decide not to change the defense position on the next turn, so I'm finally able to win this duel. Well, I guess that last duel marked the start of the challenge getting very difficult, so let's see how much of an issue Dr. Faker is. Okay. I guess not all of them will be that bad. Honestly, not much to say here. My opponent left a lot of low attack monsters without much protection, paid large life point costs, and I even had the ability to negate some of the more troublesome effects. Guess we'll just move on. I guess my punishment for having it so easy in the previous duel is the battling boxes. No matter which deck I choose to use, these cards just seem to counter everything the default decks have to offer. I lose a lot here, and I was really struggling to come up with any kind of strategy to win this duel. While rotating through the decks, I go into the duel using the basic deck without much hope for success. Going second with a few decent attack cards in my hand, my only hope here is to try and beat over every monster they throw out as soon as possible in an attempt to prevent them XZ summoning at all. I'm able to keep the pressure on for longer than I expected, but inevitably they proceed to summon Battling Boxer Lead Yoke, the card which has ended most of my attempts so far. However, they immediately rank it up to Comet Cestus. I attempt to crash a copycat into it, but they use Rib Gardener to protect it, which actually works out in my favour as I'm able to make use of Liberty at last next turn to clear their board. This game their back row has been basically non-existent, so after returning the last monster in the field to my opponent's hand, I'm able to finally set up for one big game ending attack. Going back to using the story deck, I go into the duel with Girag, unintentionally slowing down their deck by taking out Ice Hand without having any spell or traps on the field. While Girag is able to get some control of the game with an XE monster, it's nothing compared to the last game without any kind of protection effect, meaning I'm able to destroy it without too much issue multiple times in this duel. Things seem to be going really well, as my opponent runs low on cards, but they proceed to activate a card that normally wouldn't be too much of an issue, but given how I'm trying to avoid dealing too much direct damage, certainly complicates things. Spirit Barrier means I can't just chip away at the life points by attacking over monsters. Upon seeing this, I feel as though my option is once again to set up for one really big attack and win in one go. The problem there is that I have to be really sure that I can definitely win in that case. If I'm stopped in the middle of my attacks, that'll be damage unnecessarily added to the achievement that I'm trying to avoid getting. While I try to think about how best to close out this duel, I notice something as time goes on. Girag isn't actually doing a great job of clearing my side of the field. Yes, I'm taking damage here and there, but it's nothing too significant, and it occurs to me that I don't need to worry about dealing damage at all. At this rate, I can just buy time, making the most of Gaga Gardener's effect to waste turns until I win the duel by deck out. The duel with Dooman doesn't really seem to have much to comment on. The first duel I play against each opponent I expect just to learn what deck I'm going up against. I get rid of their first few monsters with things like Torrential Tribute and an MST on their Call of the Haunted, but after I play a monster with 1700 attack, it seems like that's all it takes to shut down everything for the remainder of the duel. So once again, I build up a full field, clear my opponent's monsters, and attack for game. The good times just keep on rolling as I'm back to using the Galaxy deck, arguably the best deck for this challenge I've had access to so far. A perfect start to this duel, Mizza summons a dragon monster with no protection, which gives me a chance to deal a large chunk of damage straight away with Galaxy Dragon. With Swords of Revealing Light in play, I go for the old reliable strategy of setting up a big board and getting ready to try and go for game once Swords is destroyed. Mizar is able to bring out Neo Galaxy Eyes Tachyon Dragon, but having Luminize ready to prevent the attack actually means this works out in my favour. Next turn I'm able to summon two Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon, And from there, Mizar can't do anything, as I continue to move the problematic Xyz monsters off the field as I attack. My initial attempt against Vector starts off pretty poorly. I draw quite a few Xyz related cards in my opening hand, leaving me with very few options. It isn't long before I'm defeated, and I quickly draw the conclusion that a user deck would be much more helpful here. Umbral Horror, Will-O-the-Wisp summoned not once, not twice, but 3 times and crashed into my own monsters, brings down Vector's life points a significant amount without much effort on my part. From there, I'm able to find multiple opportunities to beat other monsters with lower attack, to the point where I can just get the win with a single direct attack. The duel against Nistro quickly shows me that the character deck provided will once again not be much use here, so I switch to the user deck. Although there isn't a whole lot to this deck in particular, I am able to at least utilise the drawing power of Heart of the Underdog, Shard of Greed, and Supply Squad to maintain a decent amount of resources. With this steady supply of cards, I am able to slowly take control of the field and eventually set up for a 1-turn finish. I go through the same process in the following duel, realising very quick that the character deck just won't cut it here. The following duel against Rio, where I just use the standard deck, turns out to be pretty simple. Although I can't tribute summon any monsters, Elector is a pretty good alternative. A decent attack monster that can be special summoned pretty easily here turns out to be all I need. I slowly take care of my opponent's monsters, and without too much issue, they're left with no cards, meaning I can simply attack for game. Back to Vector again, and with a real sense of deja vu. Turn 2, I power up Ninken Dog with Rush Recklessly, but then Vector crashes 2 different Umbral Horror cards into it, racking up an easy 5,000 points of damage, and I attack over for almost another 2,000. Unfortunately, it isn't quite enough as I burn out of resources and lose the duel. The second duel initially looks like I won't be having much success. I spend the first half of the duel doing whatever I can to try and keep the Xyz monsters at bay. After taking care of a few of them, I end up back in the same Umbral Horror situation from the previous duel. This time, however, after being gifted a large chunk of damage, I have plenty more resources available compared to Vector, and I'm able to close it out. Well, if Duel 9 was where the training wheels came off, Duel 22 is where the normal wheels come off and we're just left with nothing useful to ride. Being restricted to only deal damage by attacking over monsters is a serious detriment here. The combination of Burden of the Mighty and Ragnar Zero restricting my ability to boost my monster's attack means that Don Thousand's Throne basically heals off all damage I'm able to deal. Things become trickier still as I realise that having spells and traps on the field is not a great idea, since that means Ice Hand is able to replace itself. Chances to attack directly do present themselves, but I hesitate to do so because I'm not at all confident that I can win following those attacks. In this duel, Don Thousand goes in quite aggressive on their second turn, and while I do take a chunk of damage, my following turn I'm able to get an extra draw from Heart of the Underdog and clear the majority of their resources out with just a single Fissure. Now I'm by no means in the clear yet, but in terms of advantage I've definitely been put in a strong position. A couple of turns later, all my opponent's remaining resources are used up. I manoeuvre to make sure that Fire Hand is destroyed when I have no monsters on the field, and attempts are made to salvage the duel, but I'm now in too strong of a position, and after a couple of hours of attempts, I'm finally able to pull out a win. At this point in the challenge I've realised there's no point even trying to use the main story deck. My first duel unintentionally gets quite close to winning when I almost deck my opponent out. That turned out to be a random fluke though, as I'm not able to get close to that kind of victory again. As with many of the previous duels, it mostly comes down to a big board clearing play, like here with Mirror Force and Torrential Tribute to clear Nash out. Heart of the Underdog basically acts as a poor man's Max C here, as I draw a lot of cards and now have more than enough resources to completely clear the board and win. Going into the final duel, I feel like I know enough at this point when I have a bad start. I quit and restart a few times, and although it's a little anticlimactic, a few attempts lead to a duel where I'm able to get good control on the field. I start attacking, looking to go for game, but I realise I forgot to play a Banner of Courage I needed to do enough damage. I end my turn and just hope my opponent doesn't have a play to shut me down in their next turn, but they just pass. I attack for game and finally get the achievement. With by far the hardest part of this challenge over, I start playing some random campaign missions to collect the remaining 2 achievements. Chains naturally accumulate over the course of any duel, so I continue using the user deck against random weak original season opponents, slowly getting reflective damage as they crash into my 2000 defense monsters. And with that, I've collected all the rare achievements that are possible without needing a non-rare achievement. Here's hoping the next game I try this on, I remember the rules of the actual challenge. Thanks for watching.